When I think of hip hop, I think of colors and I think of like music. You know, you think of like clothing and all this kind of stuff. And it's like looking at an abstract piece of artwork, it hits you and you can't really put it into words. With things like that, I kind of feel like they inspire my work because my work is built up from many different parts of those influences, especially like graffiti, street art. Hi, I'm Geo Law. I'm an illustrator based in London, and right now we're in Dalston and outside my studio space at Mills Junction, and this is my day in the life of. I think one of my biggest influences to kind of like draw characters when I was younger was Sonic the Hedgehog, and I liked the Sonic character. I liked all the villains and all the and all the settings and stuff. So I would copy that. Sometimes I'd trace it as a kid. And when you copy and trace, you learn about the visual rules, about what makes those characters appealing. And then later on, like with Studio Ghibli, My Neighbor Totoro, that inspired me. As a kid, you want Totoro to be real. And because he's not real, you can make him real by redrawing the character, then creating all these other characters around him. Seeing that as a kid, like really kind of just made me obsessed with, I want a world of these characters, so I can't physically make that, so I'll just put them on paper. But I always write a list, a to-do list. Yeah, so get in, turn on the computer, wait for it to boot up. And whilst I'm waiting for it to boot up, I might get a coffee or I start to write. It's good to kind of write down what you need to do for the day. So then that's my list. So I'll always have that present, and then once I've checked emails and everything, I'll just start working. I try to make a conscious effort to reflect more of like my heritage and culture into the art, but then also just take influences from things that interest me when I'm abroad. So this is part of a series that I'm creating called the Deities, and they're kind of like based on, it's like Far East Asian folklore, really, but I'm creating my own folklore. I'm creating gods that represent different aspects of things that we recognize. Like I've done a god of ramen, I've done a god of gaming, so I've done like a god of food. I kind of had this like acid color palette to kind of give it a bit more of a digital edge, because then you can imagine how these would look if they were painted traditionally. A lot of the idea of a deity and gods and such that represent aspects of life, you kind of worship them, especially in Chinese culture. You'd have like a god that was like the god of war, but also you could pray to that same god or deity, saint or whatever, for good fortune and money. And I just find it fun to kind of draw these things and create them in in vector format like this, because a lot of my artwork doesn't look like this. I don't use like gradient colors and color palettes like that. I created this Doom piece after the news came out that he passed away. I kind of wanted to like mythologize him even more, like he's kind of like some kind of weird deity with 4 arms. And that's kind of, this sparked the idea to kind of explore this a little bit more. I wanted to show like all the different characters he's created, like Victor Vaughn and like the Mad Villain collaboration and like King Ghidorah. With this, it was just like a bit of a love letter to all the characters and all the albums that he's made. My kind of creative not peak, but the beginnings of like my new form of creativity kind of like went hand in hand with me really discovering hip hop, like in my late teens. As soon as you go to like university or college, more people start to share album recommendations with you. And back in uni, like when I was in hall 2004, people would file share. So it's the beginning of like kind of people like sharing like files en masse. So people just put on like a local sharing folder all of these albums, and like Eric B. and Rakim, A Tribe Called Quest, and you just start to listen to them like, oh my god, I know A Tribe Called Quest, and then you start to like research them, go through all the albums, Fugees. So hip hop, I kind of saw like a symbiosis with how I worked. I used to work digitally in layers. You know, like hip hop artists, like sample like a 3-second segment of an obscure track and then turn it into something else. I'd do the same. I'd scan in like a leaf and then cut out a little bit of the leaf, and that would be a texture that I would use as a backdrop and all this kind of stuff. So I saw like this kind of visual relation to like listening to all those albums whilst I'm working. Approach with Caution is one of my favourite video projects. This is only my second music video project that I worked on. So I worked with the animator who directed the video, Gary Motion. Writes down a series of ideas. It's like alien invasion, Sampa's going to be a superhero, she's got 2 sidekicks. Okay, fine, you know what, I'll come up with the characters, and then I create the puppets. And we just kind of like hashed it out over like messages and that kind of thing. He was going to be this kind of colonial type alien, and then we decided, oh, let's just make him a generic alien. We didn't want to kind of put too much of a political message on the thing. And normally I'd be like, I need a storyboard, but by working like that, and we had a tight deadline as well, it just kind of, by restricting the time, it kind of got us to just nail down the idea very quickly. Thankfully, like, you know, Quakers and Sampa the Great, like they saw all my sketches and she loved it. You know, sent me a nice little Instagram message like, oh, thank you for making me into a superhero and all that kind of stuff. I was like, oh yeah, that's cool, that's cool. Yeah, it's one of my favourite things I've worked on. This is all like personal work, so I play. This is where I just get to play with like form. So I was trying to work out like what's the right pose and what's the right outfit. Before she released a new album, she released a single, Woman, and it's got an incredible video. Right. And I was like, wow, this is really, like, she's really leveled up like her kind of her image and how she wants to kind of like brand this album. And that kind of inspired me to do this piece where I just do all these different outfits. Yeah, so I kind of gave her a couple of outfits. I gave her like a hoodie, I gave her a tracksuit, and then I gave her like, it's pretty suave. Yeah, it's just like, it was just something really fun to work on. I might use this as a vehicle to kind of show, oh, I can do portraits. I try and mash up different visual styles, uses of texture, uses of colour, and try and create something new all the time. In particular, like Samurai Champloo is inspiring because they had this idea of mashing together a feudal Japan setting and putting hip hop into it, which I thought, like, this is incredible. That is very hip hop. Back in Sheffield when I was younger, I used to see a lot of murals done by like Kid Acne, who's like a pretty prominent street artist, and like lots of different like graffiti stuff. But what inspired me to get into mural art was just a visiting lecture from an artist called John Bergerman, who used to study at Nottingham Trent, where I was. And he showed us a slide of some murals he worked on in offices in like Germany and in New York, and they were just like these beautiful, kind of like thick line, bold, like scribbled, bold characters. It kind of just made me realise I've never actually made art as big as that, but I want to give it a go. There was something in me that kind of said, I can do that as well, even though I'd never proven to myself that I could. Like the older I get and the more murals I work on, now I can balance like how big characters are and how I lay it out on the wall. If it's client work, first and foremost, I ask them what they want. I try and work out if they know what they want. And then I try and kind of, I imagine there's like a scale, like how much do I put of myself in this job that's going to be efficient for my time, for the budget that they can pay me, and how much do they want me to go, all out. I used to be a little bit nervous every time. When I first started doing the murals at Facebook or whatever, their office, I was a little bit nervous, but they had so much faith in me and they couldn't wait to see what I would do. I was flown out to Burbank, California to draw for Walt Disney Animation Studio, so I was in their basement doing this 30-meter mural. Now, bear in mind that their studio is full of artists, people that can technically draw it way better than me. Disney is kind of what made me, and so that was probably the last time I felt quite nervous, because I was like, do these guys even know what I'm going to be drawing? I was getting like praise and people go, oh, this is incredible, this is really good, and I kind of felt like I shouldn't be here. Like, you guys should be doing this, but they wanted me. They wanted my style, and that kind of gave me some validity in regards to, I guess I can do something that they feel like they can't do, and they can do something I know I can't do. Make some noise. I was able to give them this like long piece of artwork on their walls. That, and bear in mind, the basement was like, so it's like a long corridor, it's like 30 meters. Now it's part of their tour. To kind of make it as a commercial illustrator, you do need to have something that a certain person wants. But then, like, as the years go by, I do tend to recognize that there is a fine point where you can totally be yourself and make the work that inspires you and makes you happy, and other people can buy into that as well. Because right now I have a thing where I have my standard type of work that gets me commissions from agencies and like companies, brands and whatever, and then there's other types of artwork that I'm making that's more expressive for me, it kind of tells stories for me, and it interests me more. I've been freelance for 12 years now, so you have to find ways to make your own work interesting to you. I felt that like I was handling a lot of my own work early on, so when it came to asking to join an agency, to have an agent, I understand what it is that an agent does for you. So like an agent, like my agents at Snyder New York are amazing, like they're like my aunties, but they're also very business as well, so like they're like the middle people, they sort out my contracts, but like they're there to support me. If a client's being odd, if a client is delaying in sending me feedback, or there's late payments and such, they're on to them straight away. I think like after uni, what kind of kept me going was naivety. I don't know what's ahead of me, I know what's behind me, so I'll just kind of keep going. I had artwork that I wanted to make and I wanted to share. I also felt that I had the support around me as well. Like my parents, they were quite worried about me, I could tell. Like, they didn't really know what kind of direction I was going to go down. They were also, supportive and liberal enough to kind of be like, you know what, we'll let him do his thing. I had like a drive to just kind of not prove my parents wrong, but just kind of prove to myself that like, I think I can become an interesting artist. But then I was constantly being inspired by a lot of things. We had a great art scene in Sheffield, and I was getting involved in the scene. And when you get involved in the scene, you share ideas with different people. I do believe that like the art that I make is first and foremost is for me, but it can also be for the community, and they can kind of like garner a feeling from it. If it makes them feel positive, it makes them feel good, then that's a good thing. I think when Dad passed away, it kind of made me feel kind of grateful for who was around me immediately. Like I had a lot of good friends that just kind of like rounded up around me. Connecting with the community and using your art as like a bridge to kind of go for people to then come across and try it themselves, or for them to ask questions of it, is a good thing. Ever since like Dad passed away, he was ill for a while, so he had dementia. I always thought that I have experienced probably the worst thing that's ever happened in my life. My mum included, and my sister, we've all experienced something that's really, really hard to it's hard to get over, but you work on it. So lecturing in front of 100 people, I spoke at my dad's funeral, which from then on, I kind of felt like I've spoken at a funeral. That's probably one of the hardest things I've done. So I can speak to 100 people. So I kind of used it as a vehicle. In a lot of ways, my dad has kind of pushed me on, to do all of these things.
What do you want your legacy and contribution to the art world?
Wow, my legacy and contribution to the art world. Okay. This is why I got into teaching. I think I would like my contribution to be that people can remember the advice that I give them. When I'm teaching students, I try and encourage them to kind of be yourself, but bear in mind, look at the things that work. Don't do what they're doing, but take the things that work and make them yours. But art-wise, I would love it if people remembered my artwork. I remember being in college at Art Foundation and looking through books with graphic designers and illustrations, and be it'd be really cool if my work was in one of these books one day. If people, there's a little page Geo Law created these murals and his style was influenced by this and that. If I'm archived, then that would be kind of cool. As long as I worked hard in the present, met as many people as possible, left a good impression, and hopefully they go on to also leave a good impression, then that's kind of what's more important to me. That's why teaching for me is quite I think there's more for me to leave behind, by talking to these people and guiding them on their way. Also it'd be really nice if someone, if someone dug up my archive of work hundreds and hundreds of years after I've gone and stuff.
Found your NFTs.
Yeah, found my NFTs. It'd also be nice, if I have great-great-grandkids or whatever that are oh, our great-great-granddad was an artist and such. But now, I just think as long as I've left a good impression, that'd be my legacy.
Today is the shadow of tomorrow. Today is the present future.